What if the highway you're driving right now has claimed drivers who simply vanished without explanation? Tonight on Black Fears, we're uncovering 8 disturbing true accounts from Pacific Northwest truckers who encountered the unexplainable on isolated routes through Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. For privacy protection, names and identifying details have been altered, but these stories are 100% real. Tell us in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? If these stories unsettle you, subscribe to Black Fears and hit that notification bell for more true horror. My name is Deacon, and I've been an owner-operator running refrigerated transport between Portland and Reno for the past 8 years. I've driven through every kind of weather, every time of day, and I've seen my share of strange things on the road. But what happened to me on Highway 97 near Bend, Oregon in March 2023 changed everything I thought I knew about being alone on the highway. I don't sleep well anymore, and I can't use my CB radio without my hand shaking. It was a Tuesday night, around 2:30 in the morning. I was hauling a full load of frozen seafood, and the roads were clear. Central Oregon in early spring can be unpredictable, but that night was perfect. Cold, clear, with stars so bright they looked fake. I had my CB on channel 19 like always, listening to the occasional chatter from other drivers. Mostly it was quiet. That's how I like it on night runs. Just me, the road, and the steady hum of my diesel engine. About 20 miles north of Bend, the CB started acting weird. At first it was just static, which isn't unusual. Sometimes you get interference from weather or terrain, but this static had a pattern to it. It would pulse, like breathing. I reached over to adjust the squelch, thinking maybe I could clear it up, but the moment my fingers touched the dial, a voice came through. Kenworth T680, White Cab, Thermo King Reefer Unit. The voice was distant, like it was coming from far away, but crystal clear through the static. My blood went cold. That was my exact truck. I looked in my mirrors, scanning for other vehicles. The highway was completely empty. Not a single set of headlights in either direction. Channel 19, the voice continued. 2:47 a.m., northbound at mile marker 138. Every detail was perfect. I checked my clock. 2:47 exactly. I grabbed my CB mic, my hand trembling. Who is this? How do you know what I'm driving? Nothing but that pulsing static. Then the voice came back, and this time it was closer. Deacon, refrigerated load. Departure Portland 9 to 15 p.m., destination Reno, ETA 7:30 a.m. I dropped the mic. Nobody knew my name except dispatch, and they sure as hell weren't on the CB at this hour. The voice knew my route, my timing, everything. I considered turning the CB off, but something stopped me. Some stupid part of my brain needed to know what this was. Sleeper cab, the voice said, and now it sounded like it was right next. To me. Gray curtain, unmade bunk, coffee thermos, half empty, black coffee, no sugar. I whipped my head around to look at the sleeper cab behind my seat. The curtain was pulled back. Everything the voice described was exactly right, down to the thermos of black coffee sitting in the cup holder. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. I pressed down on the accelerator, pushing my speed up to 75. The voice didn't stop. Dashboard. St. Christopher medal. Photo of daughter. Samantha torn corner. I stared at the dashboard. The photo of my daughter had a torn corner from when I'd pulled it out of my wallet too fast years ago. This wasn't possible. Nobody could see inside my cab. I was doing 80 now, scanning the darkness for any sign of another vehicle, a drone, anything that could explain this. The highway stretched out empty in all directions. The static grew louder, and the voice began describing things I couldn't see. Logbook in door pocket. Falsified hours on March 8th. Overweight load December 2022. Didn't report. My chest tightened. Those were things I'd never told anyone. Small violations, the kind every trucker makes. But how could anyone know? The voice wasn't threatening, wasn't angry. It was just stating facts in that distant, hollow tone. I saw the lights of a way station coming up about 5 miles ahead. Thank God. I'd pull in there, talk to whoever was on duty, figure this out. Maybe my CB was picking up some kind of weird signal. Maybe someone was hacking radio frequencies. As I got closer, the voice said something that made my skin crawl. Way station, mile marker 162, pulling in, 3:04 a.m. I hadn't decided to pull in yet. I was still a mile away, but I did it anyway, desperate for help. The way station was lit up but quiet. I pulled onto the scale and shut off my engine, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key turned. The CB was still on, still emitting that pulsing static. I jumped out of the cab and ran toward the office. A guy in his 50s was sitting at the desk, looking half asleep. "Hey, I need help," I said, my voice cracking. "Something's wrong with my radio. Someone's been describing my truck, my route, everything." He looked at me like I was crazy, but got up and followed me back to my rig. We climbed into the cab together, and the CB was silent. No static, nothing. "Turn it on," he said. I flipped the switch. Dead air. Channel 19 was completely quiet. "What channel were you on?" he asked. 19, I said. "It was right here, I swear." This voice was telling me everything about my truck, about me. The guy checked my CB, fiddled with the knobs. "Everything looks normal," he said. "You've been driving long tonight. Sometimes exhaustion can make you hear things." I wanted to argue, but what could I say? We went back to his office, and he pulled up the security footage from the scale. "Let's see what we got," he said, rewinding to when I pulled in. The footage showed my truck pulling onto the scale. Everything looked normal. But then he played it back frame by frame, and we both saw it. For just a moment, maybe 3 or 4 frames, the camera pointed at my truck showed nothing but static. Pure white noise where my truck should have been. Then it was back, clear as day. The guy's face went pale. "That's not normal," he muttered. He checked the other cameras. Same thing. A few frames of static, just when I was pulling in. "The audio," I said. "Check the audio." He pulled up the sound file. You could hear my truck, the engine, the air brakes. And underneath it all, very faint, that voice. It was describing the way station now. Office, northwest corner, 2 cameras, motion sensors. Employee name Greg. Shift ends 6 a.m. The guy, Greg apparently, leaned back from the computer. What the hell is that? We sat there for 20 minutes listening to the recording. The voice never stopped. It described every detail of the way station, things that weren't even visible on camera. The contents of Greg's lunch bag, the crack in the bathroom mirror, the number of tire pressure gauges in the equipment locker. Greg made a call to his supervisor, told him something was wrong with the security system. I just wanted to leave. "Look," Greg said finally, "I don't know what this is, but you shouldn't drive tired. There's a truck stop 15 miles up. Get some sleep, figure this out in the morning." I nodded, but I knew I wasn't going to sleep. I got back in my truck and the CB was still off. I left it off. I drove straight through to Reno. 80 miles of pure terror, checking my mirrors every few seconds, expecting to see something impossible. When I got to my destination and unloaded, I turned the CB back on. Dead silence, no static, no voice. I called my dispatch, told them I needed a few days off. They asked if I was okay, and I lied and said yes. I went home to Portland and tried to forget about it. 3 days later, I got a call from Greg at the way station. "You need to hear this," he said. His supervisor had reviewed all the security footage from that night. Every camera in the way station had those same frames of static, all at the exact moment I pulled in. And the audio file had been analyzed. The voice wasn't coming from my CB radio. It was coming from everywhere. Every microphone in the facility picked it up at the same time. But here's what really scared me. Greg said they pulled my truck's GPS data from that night. According to the satellite tracking, my truck was in 2 places at once for exactly 4 minutes. The system showed me on the scale at the way station, and simultaneously 17 miles south on Highway 97. Both signals were equally strong. Both showed my VIN number. Both were definitely my truck. The voice on the recording, Greg said, his voice shaking. Right before you left, it said something else. We didn't catch it the first time, but when we cleaned up the audio, it was clear. He played it for me over the phone. That distant, hollow voice saying, "Look in the mirror." I remembered that moment. Right before I pulled out of the way station, I'd glanced in my rearview mirror, just a quick check of the road behind me. But I hadn't really looked. Not carefully. Greg sent me a screenshot from the security footage, the clearest frame they had of my truck leaving. I opened it on my phone, and my hands started shaking again. In the reflection of my driver's side mirror, barely visible but definitely there, was a figure standing in my sleeper cab. The curtain was pulled back like I'd left it, and someone was standing there, perfectly still, watching me drive. The image quality wasn't good enough to make out details, just a dark silhouette, but it was unmistakably human-shaped. Or something shaped like a human. I sold my truck 2 weeks later. Took a massive loss on it, but I didn't care. I bought a different rig, different model, different color. I don't do overnight runs anymore. I don't use CB radio at all. I installed 3 cameras inside my cab, and I check them obsessively. The worst part is not knowing what it was. Greg said the way station had 2 more incidents in the following month. Different trucks, different drivers, same pulsing static on the security footage. Both times, the drivers reported hearing voices describing things they couldn't possibly know. The state patrol got involved, talked about radio interference or elaborate pranks, but they never found an explanation. I still drive. I have to work, but I take different routes now, avoid Highway 97 completely. Sometimes, late at night when I'm the only one on the road, I think about that voice. How it knew everything. How it described my truck from the inside. How it told me to look in the mirror. And I wonder if it's still out there, watching other drivers, describing their lives in that hollow, distant voice. I wonder if it's something that's always been there, in the static between radio channels, waiting for someone to listen. I wonder if looking in the mirror that night was a warning or an invitation. My daughter asks me sometimes why I don't drive at night anymore. I tell her the money's better on day routes. It's easier than explaining that I'm terrified of being alone in my cab when the sun goes down, terrified of that moment when I might hear static on a radio I don't even use anymore, terrified that if I look in my mirror at the wrong time, I'll see that figure again, standing in my sleeper cab, watching me with whatever passes for eyes in that dark silhouette. Highway 97 is still there. Trucks still drive it every night. And somewhere in those empty miles between cities, in the static between channels, that voice is still describing things it shouldn't be able to see. My name is Maggie, and I haul construction equipment through the mountain passes of Washington State. Been doing this job for 6 years now, and I've driven through blizzards, whiteouts, ice storms, everything nature can throw at a truck. I thought I'd seen it all until October 2019, when I found myself pulled over near Stevens Pass on Highway 2, staring at something that still doesn't make sense. The doctors said it was hypothermia and carbon monoxide, but that doesn't explain what I saw. That doesn't explain the skin. It was October 14th, around 11 p.m. Early season snowstorm hit hard and fast, the kind that catches you off guard because it's too early for serious snow. 1 minute the roads were wet, the next minute I couldn't see 10 feet in front of my headlights. I was hauling a flatbed loaded with excavator parts, heavy load, and the wind was pushing me around like a toy. Highway 2 through Stevens Pass is narrow and winding, not the kind of place you want to be in a storm. I saw the emergency turnout signs and took the next one, pulling into a wide spot carved out of the mountainside. My plan was simple. Wait out the worst of it, maybe an hour or two, then keep moving. The turnout was bigger than I expected, room for maybe 5 or 6 trucks, and there was already one there. A Peterbilt, blue cab, engine running, headlights on. The driver's door was hanging open. Something about that open door bothered me immediately. Nobody leaves their door open in a snowstorm. The cab would fill with snow and cold air in minutes. I grabbed my flashlight and my phone, pulled my hood up tight, and stepped out into the storm. The wind hit me like a physical force, nearly knocking me sideways. Snow was already piling up, maybe 3 inches on the ground, coming down so thick I could barely see the other truck. I approached carefully, calling out. No response. The engine was running smooth, heat pouring out of the cab. I climbed up on the step and looked inside. The driver was slumped over the steering wheel, completely still. My first thought was heart attack or stroke. I reached in to check for a pulse, and that's when I felt how cold his skin was. Not just cold, frozen. His neck was like touching stone, rigid. But when I pulled my hand back, I saw his chest move. Just barely, so slight I almost missed it. He was breathing, but so slowly it didn't seem possible. Maybe one breath every 30 seconds, maybe longer. I shook his shoulder, called out, nothing. His skin had this weird waxy quality, almost translucent, and there were patterns on it. Frost patterns, like what you see on windows, but they were growing across his exposed skin, spreading slowly even as I watched. I called 911, fumbling with my phone. The dispatcher picked up and I tried to explain. Unresponsive driver, possible hypothermia, emergency turnout on Highway 2 near milepost 64. She told me help was coming, but the roads were bad, might be 30 minutes or more. She walked me through, checking vitals. His pulse was there, but slow, impossibly slow, maybe 10 beats per minute. She asked me to get him warm, move him if I could. I couldn't move him. His body was rigid, frozen in place over that steering wheel. I grabbed a blanket from my truck and tried to wrap it around him, but the frost patterns kept spreading. They were beautiful in a horrible way, like crystals growing across his skin, intricate geometric designs that branched and split. I touched one, and it was cold enough to burn. That's when I saw the second truck. It was parked further back in the turnout, half hidden by the falling snow. Another semi, engine off this time, covered in a layer of snow that suggested it had been there for hours. I should have stayed with the first driver, waited for help, but something pulled me toward that second truck. Some instinct that this was bigger than one driver in trouble. The second cab was locked, windows frosted over on the inside. I scraped away the ice on the driver's window and shined my flashlight through. Another driver, slumped in the seat. Same waxy, translucent skin. Same frost patterns spreading across visible areas. And that same impossible slow breathing, chest barely moving. I found 5 more trucks in that turnout. 5 more drivers, every single one in the same state. Frozen, but alive, breathing once or twice a minute, skin covered in those spreading frost patterns. Some were in their cabs, some had made it partway out before collapsing in the snow. One was sitting on the ground, back against his tire, head tilted back, mouth open. The frost patterns on his face were the most elaborate, covering his cheeks and forehead like lace. The last driver I found was Alessandro. I know his name because his logbook was open on the passenger seat, and I checked it looking for any information that might help. He was different from the others. His skin wasn't just translucent, it was almost transparent. I could see the veins underneath, dark blue networks that didn't look quite right. The frost patterns on him were 3-dimensional, raised off his skin like actual ice crystals growing out of his pores. I was standing next to Alessandro's truck when I started feeling it. A creeping cold that had nothing to do with the storm. It started in my fingers and toes, spreading up my limbs. Not painful, almost comfortable. My thoughts started slowing down, like trying to think through thick syrup. I looked down at my hands and saw the beginning of frost patterns on my fingertips, tiny crystalline structures branching across my skin. That broke through the comfortable haze. I ran back to my truck, stumbling through snow that seemed deeper than it should be. My legs felt heavy and slow. I cranked the heat all the way up, held my hands against the vents, and watched those frost patterns slowly fade. My heart was racing now, fear cutting through whatever was trying to slow me down. I had come within minutes of ending up like those other drivers. The emergency vehicles arrived 45 minutes later. State Patrol, ambulances, fire rescue. They had to hike in the last quarter mile because the road was too treacherous for the ambulances. I met them at my truck, and when I tried to explain what I'd found, the words came out jumbled. 7 drivers, all frozen, all still breathing. They looked at me like I was in shock, but they followed me to the other trucks. The paramedics confirmed what I'd told them. 7 drivers in some kind of hypothermic state, but with vital signs that shouldn't be possible. You can't have a pulse that's slow and still be alive. They started loading the drivers into ambulances working fast. One of the paramedics, a woman in her 40s, kept looking at the frost patterns on the driver's skin. She scraped a sample off Alessandro's cheek, sealed it in a container. I saw her expression. She was just as confused as I was. The State Patrol took my statement. I told them everything. How I'd found the trucks, the open door, the spreading frost patterns. The officer, writing it all down, kept asking me to repeat details, like he was hoping I'd change my story. Before they let me go, a man in a suit showed up. No badge, no introduction, just questions. How long was I exposed? Did I touch any of the drivers? Did I feel cold? I told him about the frost patterns on my own hands, how they disappeared when I warmed up. His expression didn't change, but he wrote something down and made a phone call I couldn't hear. They let me leave around 3 a.m. after the snow had stopped. My truck was covered in ice, and it took 20 minutes to scrape the windows clear. As I was leaving, I saw them setting up a perimeter around the turnout, orange cones and flashing lights. More people in suits had arrived, not police, something else. They were taking photographs and collecting samples from the snow. I didn't hear anything for 2 weeks. Then a state patrol officer called and asked me to come to a meeting. It was at a medical examiner's office in Seattle, in a conference room with no windows. There were 5 other people there. The suit from the scene, 2 doctors, a woman who introduced herself as being from the Department of Health, and a man who never gave his name or title. The doctors explained that all 7 drivers had been treated and released. Full recovery, no permanent damage. Medically, they'd suffered severe hypothermia and carbon monoxide poisoning from sitting in idling trucks in an enclosed area. The frost patterns were ice crystal formation due to extreme cold and moisture. Everything had a rational explanation. But then the woman from the Department of Health showed me photographs. The frost patterns weren't random. When they analyzed them under microscopes, every pattern from every driver was identical. The same crystalline structure, the same branching paths, the same geometric designs. 7 different people, different locations in the turnout, different amounts of time exposed, all developing the exact same patterns down to microscopic detail. That's not how ice forms. That's not how anything natural forms. The unnamed man finally spoke. He asked me about the cold I'd felt, the comfortable haze, the patterns on my own fingers. I described it exactly as I remembered. He slid a photograph across the table. It was a microscope image of the sample taken from Alessandro's face. The frost pattern, magnified hundreds of times. And inside the ice crystals were structures that looked biological, not bacteria or viruses, but something organized, geometric and deliberate. They asked me not to talk about what I'd seen. Not ordered, just asked, for the driver's privacy, for ongoing investigation, for reasons they didn't fully explain. They gave me a card with a phone number and told me to call if I experienced any symptoms. Unexplained cold, slow thoughts, unusual skin patterns. I took the card and left. Alessandro contacted me 3 months later, found my information through the police report. He wanted to meet, talk to someone else who'd been there. We met at a truck stop outside Spokane. He looked normal, healthy, but when he shook my hand, his skin was cold. Not frozen, just perpetually cold, like he couldn't quite get warm. He told me the other drivers were the same. All of them recovered but changed. They got cold easier, thought slower in winter. And sometimes, when it was below freezing, they could see the beginnings of those frost patterns on their skin. The medical explanation didn't satisfy him either. He'd done research, found old reports from the area. The turnout where we'd been, it was built over the entrance to an old railroad tunnel, sealed up in the 1950s after a series of accidents. Workers died in there, something about a cave-in in winter conditions. Before it was sealed, there were stories about the tunnel, how it stayed cold even in summer, how ice would form on the walls in patterns that didn't match any known crystalline structure. We talked for 3 hours. He showed me his logbook from that night. His last entry was at 9:47 p.m., noting the storm and his decision to pull over. He had no memory of anything after that until waking up in the hospital. None of the drivers did. Whatever happened in those hours, whatever caused that cold and those patterns, it took their memories too. I still drive Highway 2, still haul loads through Stevens Pass, but I don't stop at that turnout anymore, even in clear weather. The state closed it officially 6 months after the incident, put up barriers and no parking signs. If you drive past it now, you can see the old trucks still parked there sometimes. Not real trucks, just shapes in the shadows that look like them. And on the coldest nights, if you slow down and look carefully, you can see frost patterns on the barriers. Identical geometric designs spreading across metal and concrete. Alessandro doesn't drive anymore. The cold got worse for him. Progressive. Last I heard, he'd moved to Arizona, trying to stay warm. The other drivers scattered too, most of them leaving trucking, leaving Washington entirely. 7 people touched by something we don't understand. Changed by it. Carrying those invisible frost patterns inside them forever. The Department of Health never called again. The investigation went quiet. Whatever they found in those ice crystals, whatever those biological structures were, it stayed classified or ignored, maybe both. But every October, when the first snow falls in the mountains, I think about that turnout. About 7 drivers breathing impossibly slowly, frost spreading across their skin in perfect identical patterns. About how close I came to joining them, and whether part of me did anyway. Some microscopic change I'm still carrying. Have you ever felt a cold that seemed wrong, that felt like it was coming from inside instead of outside? Tell me in the comments, because I still wonder how many others have touched whatever lives in that old tunnel. My name is Lionel, and for the past 12 years, I've been a hazmat certified freight driver, running specialized cargo across the Pacific Northwest. It's a job that gets under your skin. Long, silent highways, weather that turns on a dime, and the weight of whatever you're hauling bearing down from behind. I've driven through snow in Idaho, fog so thick you could slice it in Northern California, and relentless rain all across Oregon. But in June 2021, somewhere near Eureka on the I-5, I was asked to transport something I wish I'd never laid eyes on. This was no ordinary load. What happened that night still makes me question what's real when I'm out there alone. It was just after midnight when I pulled into the loading dock of a research facility up near the state line. The job was different from the start. My dispatcher said there'd be no paperwork other than a single-page manifest, and the container I was to haul was sealed, reinforced, and off-limits. The staff on site were tense, moving quickly, avoiding my questions. They loaded the container themselves, warning me not to touch it, not to stop unless absolutely necessary, and to ignore any unusual noises. I'd heard my share of weird cautions, usually from superstition, but the urgency in their voices was real. The manifest listed it as geological samples, returned to northern facility. The instructions were precise. Pick up at 12:30 a.m., deliver by 9 a.m., no stops, no opening the container, stick to highway routes. My cab was silent, the only sound being my own breathing and the idling engine. As soon as I hit the highway, I felt it. the low-frequency hum vibrating through the chassis, not coming from the road or engine but from the sealed container behind me. It set my teeth on edge and made my chest feel heavy. 20 miles down I-5, the world seemed to tilt. The GPS flickered, recalculating my position to coordinates that didn't make sense, somewhere off-road, even though the pavement was smooth beneath me. The constellations above looked slightly wrong. Stars too close together, some burning wrong colors I'd never seen. I checked my mirrors, and the sky behind seemed to curve and twist, as if bending around the load I was carrying. I kept my CB radio off, not wanting anything from outside to distract me. Every time I reached the next mile marker, the hum intensified. At one point, a passing truck's lights flickered violently as it drew near. Then the rig dropped back out of sight faster than was possible. At the next rest area, I tried to make a call, but my phone showed full bars, and yet refused to connect. The dashboard lights dimmed and brightened out of sync, the digits on the clock rearranging themselves briefly before snapping back. Halfway through the trip, I was forced to stop by a routine checkpoint, a state patrol vehicle blocking the highway ahead. The officer handed me a breathalyzer, checked my logbook, and stared too long at the manifest. "You're carrying a lot more than rocks," he said under his breath, and the way he looked at the container made me uneasy. He waved me on, but as I pulled away, I glanced in the side mirror and saw his cruiser, headlights flicker and blur, stretching horizontally like a shadow pulled thin. 30 miles to go, and everything in the cab felt alien. My own hands unsteady on the wheel, the taste of blood metallic in my mouth, even though I hadn't bitten my lip. I found myself unable to remember the previous few minutes, as if parts of my route were missing. The hum from the container made the air vibrate. When I finally reached a stretch of highway with no cars, I pulled onto the shoulder against every warning in my head, needing to breathe and check the load. Stepping out into the warm night air, I walked toward the container. The grass by the roadside was flattened, curling in spirals rather than the usual patterns. When I touched the metal with my bare hand, every hair on my body stood on end, and a shudder passed through me, so strong my knees nearly buckled. For just a moment, the container's shadows moved backward, against the light from my own cab. I heard a sound from inside, a slow, deliberate scraping, then a series of clicks, each one coming from a different part of the walls. "Lionel," I heard, clear as day, not through my ears, but inside my mind. I staggered back, racing to my cab, and forced myself onward, the air in the cab now so heavy with a metallic tang that I had to roll the windows down. The sky above was fluid, stars bending and swirling in unnatural orbits. For the last 40 miles, my memories are blank, a smear of sensation. My dash cam, when I checked it later, recorded only total blackness, no sound. When I finally reached the northern facility, the staff there, pale and exhausted, accepted the load without comment. My manifest was signed, no questions, and one of the researchers met my eyes and murmured, "You made it." Not everyone does. I didn't ask what that meant. For days afterward, the taste of iron didn't leave my tongue, and the hum seemed to echo everywhere, even in the silence of my home. Later, on a forum for veteran truckers, I searched up the manifest reference number, desperate for answers. One post, quickly deleted, described similar jobs, all tied to deep ocean research and geological surveys near the Cascadia subduction zone. The container, they said, sometimes caused reality to slip. Drivers reporting lost time, wild weather, and memory gaps. I still wonder what was in that container, if it was a piece of earth not meant to travel, or something that doesn't belong to this place. I call the experience the road that wasn't, because my GPS logs still show a 40-mile segment where the truck registered as both on and off the highway at the same instant. My dispatcher swears it was a technical glitch, but it keeps me up at night. Now I think twice before taking gigs from research facilities, and I haven't driven past Eureka since. My advice to other drivers: if your cargo starts humming and the world starts bending, trust yourself and keep moving. Have you ever lost hours on the road, felt reality slip for a moment? Comment with your story. Do you believe some roads hide things that refuse to be carried? My name is Garrett, and for most of my life, trucking has been the rhythm of existence. Endless road, dispatch buzzing, the smell of diesel and cold morning air. December 1998. Along Oregon's Highway 101 was where everything familiar changed. I'd been running long haul for almost 15 years. Just a man, his cab, and the Pacific storms that lash the coast. That night, a convoy of identical white semis appeared out of the darkness, turning the highway into a test of sanity and survival. The evening began as usual. I stopped for coffee at a rundown station near Tillamook, checking the weather, refilling my logbook, chatting with two other drivers about slippery coastal turns and the forecast for more rain. I loaded up and set off for Brookings at 9:30 p.m., figuring to get halfway before finding a safe turnout or motel. My rig was a Freightliner Cascadia, running dry goods east and south, idle slow, and the CB radio set to a low murmur. 20 miles up the coast, a dense fog rolled in, swallowing the world outside the windshield. Visibility closed to a ghost white smear, and the steady crash of surf on the west side vanished. That's when I saw them. 4 white semis, unmarked, headlights blazing but no running lights. They moved in perfect synchrony, their trailers identical, each with a strange symbol painted on the rear door, a circle divided by an arrow. I slowed down, thinking to let them pass, but they matched my speed exactly. Every lane change I made, the nearest truck mirrored me with split-second precision. I tried to pass, creeping up the left, but the lead rig swept gently over, boxing me out. The CB crackled with static. Then a voice, inhumanly steady, murmured, "Follow the protocol." Every attempt I made to exit, accelerate, or slow was blocked by their orchestrated maneuvers. After half an hour, the mystery wore me down. Sweat pooled under my collar despite the chill, every nerve electrified. I reached for my phone to record the moment, but the battery was dead, though it had been nearly full at the station. The fog thickened, muffling all sound except my own heartbeat and the motors. The white trucks formed a cocoon, trapping my rig with geometric precision. I spotted a turnout and signaled, preparing to jolt free by cutting between the second and third truck. As I edged over, the CB voice returned, this time with my name. "Garrett, you know what happens." All the hair on my arms stood. I gunned the engine, forcing my way ahead, tires skidding, feeling pressure from every side. For a terrifying moment, every mirror showed trucks closing in, their faces lost behind blinding headlights. Just as I hit the shoulder, the convoy broke formation, gliding seamlessly back onto the highway behind me. Breathing ragged, I waited in that turnout, counting my own pulse. The white trucks moved on, fading slowly into the mist. In their absence, silence fell. I checked my rearview mirror one last time and saw something impossible. A line of trucks driving perfectly backward, taillights bright, then vanishing at a bend. I was shaken but determined to find answers. The next morning, I visited a truck stop in Lincoln City and told my story to a group of regulars. One old-timer, Armando, nodded solemnly. Been driving 40 years. Heard of the convoy protocol. You escaped, but sometimes they come back. He told me stories of other drivers boxed in by identical rigs, all with the same symbol, some never seen again. Rumor had it, locals called them the Eternal Convoy, dating back to the 70s, a rolling ritual no outsider could break. Armando showed me a faded photo, 8 white trucks, perfect alignment, and the same arrowed circle. In the weeks that followed, strange details haunted me. My dispatch called to ask about the delay and said my GPS showed 2 trucks on my route that night. The way station footage was corrupted. All attempts to retrieve my exact movements failed with errors. My tires had subtle marks, circular grooves not matching anything on the roads. I searched local records, trucker forums, and even folklore groups. Every so often, someone described identical encounters, trapped by white semis in the coastal fog, blocked from leaving, hearing their own names growled through CB static. There was no official mention, nothing in the DOT archives, just stories passed truck to truck, coffee counter to quiet diner. Some nights, I still dream of that convoy. The rain hammering my cab, the steady drone of engines, and my name whispered in the static. When I see a white semi in my mirrors, I grip the wheel a little tighter. I always check for the symbol. I wonder what would have happened if I'd truly followed their protocol and never forced my escape. People dismiss the tales. Just a trick of the fog, long hours playing with the mind. But out there, buried in the Pacific mist, something travels Highway 101 with its own rules, rituals, and agenda. Maybe it's a group. Maybe it's something ancient hiding in the machine. I'm just grateful I broke away. If you ever find yourself boxed in by something uncanny, trust your gut, and never follow the convoy's formation. In your opinion, do legends like the convoy protocol keep highways safer? Or do they hide something far stranger beneath the surface? Drop your thoughts, or any unusual highway stories in the comments. Let's see who's encountered the mysterious side of the Pacific Northwest. My name is Riley, and I've spent the last 6 years as a regional driver for a large delivery fleet in Washington and Idaho. It was August 2024, I-90 near Snoqualmie Pass, a stretch I knew like my own hands. The air was heavy with that late summer post-rain smell, and I was pushing for one last run before sunrise. Trucker routines never change. Log your hours, check the DOT updates, small talk at the fueling islands, maybe nod at another driver through the glass. Sometimes, if you're unlucky, a voice finds you through more than the radio, a voice that belongs to the past. I'd finished off a bottled coffee and wiped the last of the crumbs from my logbook, scanning the route details with the inside cab lamp burning low. Dispatch was running late that night. Radio chatter had dropped off, the only sounds the wind hissing against my mirrors and the thump of the reefer cycle out back. I was expecting a simple update, maybe a route closure or traffic alert. Instead, my in-cab tablet flickered. Then the dispatch caller rang with that old-time analog beep I hadn't heard in years. The voice on the line was rough, lower than I recognized from my usual contacts. It was calmly insistent, giving me new instructions. Don't take the usual exit. Divert south and park at an alternate rest stop. The location puzzled me. There hadn't been an active truck rest there in at least 8 years. Everyone in the area knew it was closed and boarded up after a mudslide rerouted most of the overnight freight. I asked twice for confirmation, but the dispatcher just repeated the details. Skip the obvious pull-off, keep driving, and wait for a spot to open at the old Timberline rest area. Heading west, banners of fog unspooled across my windshield, wrapping the road in white and muffling the usual highway hum. As I signaled and took the exit nearly hidden under a misspelled sign, I couldn't shake the sense that something had peeled me off my safe route and into memory. The old rest area was still there, 2 fluorescent poles half lit by sparks from a humming breaker box. The concrete building was overgrown, but not collapsed, its windows smeared gray with age. Following dispatch's voice, I parked in slot 13 as instructed. The air outside was still, but a subtle vibration buzzed under my boots as I stepped out, like a generator working far underground. I keyed the mic for an update, but only got static. The dispatcher's tone, which had begun as brisk, had softened, almost like recognizing an old friend. Stay in your cab and wait for further instructions. That was all. 20 empty minutes ticked by. My coffee turned sour and metallic in the bottle, refusing to go down my throat. No other rigs showed. I stepped out and wandered the parking area, trying to locate any sign of normal life, or maybe another fool following impossible dispatch directions. In the flickery, half-light, my breath fogged as the air cooled. The building whispered with shifting metal and the vague rattle of loose pipes. A picnic bench, half swallowed by weeds, was littered with plastic cups, baked to translucent by the sun. Out back, I found a faded bronze plaque by the door. In memory of Jaden, devoted dispatcher, whose dedication kept drivers safe, lost August 23, 2016. The chill deepened in my chest, a tension between sweat on my neck and ice under my skin. I vaguely remembered hearing about Jaden's accident, a heart attack in this very building on the graveyard shift. Trying to radio in again, I instead picked up a faint, distant voice, guiding me through a series of odd instructions. Park closer, check for a breaker by the vending machines. Write a note under the mat at the door. Following the last instruction, I lifted the mat and found a torn slip of logbook paper. If you made it here, you're not alone. Light footsteps clicked behind me. I spun, heart pounding, but the lot was empty, save for the heat rising off my cab's metal hood. The strange voice, my dispatcher, grew fainter, almost regretful, dissolving into static. My tablet, cold to the touch, glowed with one message: home safe. I drove off shaken, my cab filling with the stale smell of burnt wiring and old coffee, the taste metallic and sharp on my tongue. At the next stop, I called Central Dispatch. They denied sending any new routes or orders and said the graveyard shift had been automated for years. No human dispatcher in the system late at night. Reviewing my own call logs, I found no outbound or inbound messages logged after midnight. My delivery that morning was marked on time, but I found an odd note appended in the system. Alternate route, approved by Jaden. Nearly 2 weeks later, an old friend at dispatch, Fletcher, reached out. Heard you wound up at Timberline. No one routes there since Jaden passed, he said, uneasy. Some say he still tries to keep a few trucks safe, at least the ones who listen. His words were awkward, half joking, but couldn't cover the tension beneath. Later, in a driver forum, I asked if anyone else had gotten strange calls. Late that night, a private message from Kaysen arrived. Not just you. Same voice. Less dead ends since. Now, when running the pass at night, a fragment of static sometimes crawls across my radio, a half-familiar voice wishing me home safe. Some drivers say to avoid the place, others leave an extra cup outside the building, for Jaden. I've never stopped at Timberline again, but each time I approach that old, overgrown pull-off near the pass, I grip the wheel and check my mirrors, waiting for a voice that shouldn't exist. Why do you think some stories of ghostly protection linger so long in trucker culture? Are they true encounters, or just ways to give meaning to the loneliest nights? Chime in below if you've ever had a call that felt like more than a voice in the static. My name is Evelyn, and I've been a long-haul trucker since I was 22. There's a rhythm to driving the Pacific Northwest in winter, the weight of snowstorms over Idaho ridges, the snap of rain against metal, and the persistent hum of engines carrying goods between worlds, isolated by night and nature. In February 2020, a detour off Highway 12 changed everything I believed about what waits in those forests. I'd always trusted my instincts, but nothing prepared me for the infection route and the way a single night could alter the course of every mile after. It started innocently enough. Dispatch flagged me for a last-minute lumber run. Emergency transport out of Lewiston, headed toward Coeur d'Alene. It had been snowing for days. Frost clung to every edge of my Peterbilt. The roads grew slick and dangerous. DOT updates warned of a chemical spill on the main route, urging drivers to stay clear, reroute if possible. I checked my maps. Every alternate road was half buried under snow, but I'd driven them before. As I turned off onto the remote logging bypass, the woods pressed in, dark and filled with the faint smell of pine and diesel. 5 miles into the detour, the storm thickened, visibility dropping. My CB radio hissed with fragments, warnings from unknown voices, a repeated "don't slow down." The trees outside blurred together, their branches glistening with icy residue, and the taste in my mouth shifted, dry and metallic, as adrenaline kicked in. Then came the overturned tanker truck, I spotted its hulking mass just around a blind turn, hazard flashers weak in the heavy snowfall. Its cargo was marked Agricultural Treatment, Compound 11B, but the warnings were clear. Hazardous on contact, stay upwind. I parked 50 feet back, killed my engine, and grabbed my high-vis jacket and gloves, heart pounding. As I approached, the world narrowed to a tunnel of light and noise. Footsteps sank in snow. The smell grew acrid and chemical, sharp enough to make my eyes water. The air vibrated uneasily, and the taste of copper filled my throat. The driver, Scott, lay contorted by the open cab, his face slick with sweat, eyes frantic and wild. His body was twisted in ways no accident should explain, bones jutting as if something inside had forced them to the surface. "Don't touch anything," he screamed, voice shredding the silence between us. I froze, breath fogging in the stifling chemical steam. "It's in me. It's burning," Scott panted, pointing to the black liquid pooling near the tanker. Every instinct said to help, but fear rooted my feet. As I watched, the fluid seemed almost alive, slithering, seeking, drawn toward any source of warmth. Lightning cracked somewhere distant. The air charged with energy, and a low growl pulsed up through my boots. The world shook as the driver's wounds worsened. Tendons stretching, skin splitting, a bizarre black foam bubbling in raw gashes. The forest echoed with muffled cries, branches rattling as the infection scene escalated. I staggered back, slipping on ice, feeling the world constrict. I called emergency services. The dispatcher's voice was oddly calm, instructing me to keep distance and wait for hazmat teams. My cab felt claustrophobic, every surface seeming to pulse with unseen heat. Tools vibrated on the floor, and each breath burned in my chest. The snow became tinged with a faint brown stain that left a bitter taste on the air. Scott crawled, desperate, from his cab. "They said it was safe. They lied," he gasped, voice broken. A trail of foam and blood marked his frantic path, the material eating at rubber, metal, even stone. Shadows of movement danced in the periphery, branches trembling as if braced for impact. 20 minutes passed in terror. The fluid crept toward my truck, steaming, nearly sentient, as the world outside built to fever pitch. The wind howled, rattling doors and shaking the mirrors, and I could feel, in my bones, a low thrum that wasn't my engine. With headlights off, the forest pressed closer, sounds amplified, tearing, gasping, fractures echoing out. I stuffed a rag in my mouth to battle the chemical taste as tears ran down my cheeks. When emergency lights flashed in the distance, Scott had fallen silent. His body was distorted. Pieces shifted as if rearranged, blood-black stains etched across his clothing. Hazmat squads barked orders, "Stay back, stay inside," and set up floodlights, their own boots squelching in the tainted snow. In the haze, I watched them suit up, drawn into the scene's epicenter. One shouted, "It moved," while another slammed a containment barrier over the spreading fluid. The rest of the night was chaos. Sample collection, shouted orders, the drone of generators, and the hiss of chemical cleanup. My cab filled with the smell of bleach and electric ozone. Every breath fought for equilibrium. I watched Scott's form loaded into a containment pod, paramedics masked and jittery. Their voices vibrated with controlled terror. One technician said, "Not the first case, not the last." When dawn broke, the world outside was scarred. A patch of snow burned away in curling patterns, the tanker truck a skeleton. Hazmat teams debriefed me, recorded every sensory observation, smells, heat, tastes, feelings of vibration and pressure. They wouldn't let me leave until they'd scanned my truck, tested my boots, checked my skin for weird textures. "Contamination risk isn't over," they warned, eyes locked on me. The official story, released 2 days later, claimed chemical spill, quick cleanup, no fatalities. But the truth lingered in every muscle ache and every dream haunted by black liquid. I joined an online group for regional drivers, reading accounts of missing time, nausea, and moving shadows following similar spills. The next month, a stretch of Highway 12 was quietly closed, signage erased as rumors swirled among local haulers. Now, every winter run east is haunted. The smell of frost, the buzz of static, the metallic taste in the air, and shadows flickering too fast for headlights. I still see Scott's twisted silhouette in the edges of every snowy truck mirror. Friends insist it was just a chemical accident, but the memory of that sentient black foam, gnawing, moving, eating its way into the world, won't fade. When I share the story, people always ask, "Did you ever think about quitting?" But I never do. Someone needs to haul through the infection route, even if every mile might mean bringing back more than just timber. If you've ever heard warnings or witnessed something unnatural on a winter run, share your experience in the comments. Do you believe highways can become infected by chemicals, by darkness, or by something we still can't name? My name is Rosemary, and I drive truckloads of produce up and down Oregon's highways, usually sticking to familiar daylight timetables and well-lit rest stops. But every so often, a run stretches into the late hours, and that's when highways become something else. Tunnels where every shadow holds a secret, and every stranger seems just a little more dangerous. In November 2022, I learned firsthand there are threats far worse than the rumors that circle CB radios. This story isn't about the supernatural, but what's out there hunting for the desperate kindness of strangers. The job started with a call from dispatch, a reroute that had me running Highway 97 from Klamath Falls to Bend with a refrigerated trailer of berries. A storm front was sweeping in from the Cascades, scraping the sky raw and spilling sleet on the blacktop. With the clock nudging 10 p.m. and most truck stops seeing last checks for the night, I stocked up on coffee and protein bars, double-checked my mirrors, and set off alone. Miles ticked by in rain and wind. There's a rhythm to wipers on high, to the growl of your own engine isolated by rain. South of Crescent, headlights flickered behind me, first distant, then drawing closer, but not a fellow semi. Near an old crossroads, I spotted a figure huddled beneath the flares of a shut-down emergency vehicle, thumbs sticking out for a ride. Stopping wasn't my habit, but something in his posture, a weird hunched vulnerability, undercut my caution. I radioed dispatch, only static in response, then rolled to a slow crawl as the figure approached in the headlights. He was young, maybe early 20s, shaggy hair plastered to his forehead, a windbreaker soaked to black. "Cassius," he said, "headed to Bend. Battery died." He flashed an ID, but I only caught Cassius and Oregon before he stuffed it back in his wallet. He clutched an old duffel bag and slumped into the passenger seat, teeth chattering from cold. His gaze, though, was unfocused, too sharp sometimes, then far away, as if listening to something not in the cab. The drive settled into uncomfortable silence. Cassius said little, voice a strained monotone, asking about my routes and the security systems on my truck with a curiosity that set my skin crawling. I chalked it up to nerves until I caught him staring at the knife stashed in the dashboard tray. Half an hour into the ride, the rain thickened. I asked Cassius if he wanted to nap or warm up in the sleeper. "Just keep driving," he murmured. A mile before our next planned stop, he suddenly asked, "Have you ever heard about the disappearances?" The way he said it, cold and direct, froze me worse than any storm. Drivers, like you, pick up a stranger and never make the next way station. I tried to lighten the mood, but he just smiled slightly, never blinking. When I looked away to check a side mirror, I felt the shift in the air. Cassius reached into his jacket and in one swift motion brought out a hunting knife, glinting faint blue in the cab's sparse light. My pulse hammered, my grip tightened on the wheel. "Pull over," Cassius said evenly, "and don't try anything." I kept my eyes on the road and fought the urge to panic. Rain drummed on metal, my thoughts shredded by images of headlines. Missing truckers, bodies, stories we only whispered about at overnight diners. He kept the blade in his hand, almost casual, the edge reflecting little storms of passing cars. I scanned the route for any sign of help, but the trees were thick and the highway had emptied behind us. On impulse, I feigned a coughing fit and reached for my water, grabbing my phone in the same hand. Cassius caught the move, slicing the phone from my grip so swift it left a small cut across my knuckle. Adrenaline lit my mind. As Cassius watched the road, I swung the wheel hard, fishtailing into the shoulder and sending the cab into a controlled skid. The momentum threw him against the dash, and I used the split second to scramble from my seat, wrenching the door open and tumbling into the rain-soaked weeds. I scrambled down the embankment, sliding in mud and hearing the cab door slam behind me. Cassius gave chase. The knife flashed in the spare glow of taillights as he crashed through the brush behind me, breathing heavy, muttering, almost laughing. My shoes sucked at mud, frost biting at my fingers. I ran further than the lights of the highway. Fear, cold and tight, every sense screaming to keep going. I found partial cover between two fallen logs, slowing my breath, listening to Cassius thrashing through branches, and calling my name, taunting me with the knife, and stories of drivers who thought they were safe. When his footsteps faded, replaced by a sudden complete silence broken only by the far-off hum of tires, I risked a look back. Cassius's form vanished into forest darkness. I crawled uphill through undergrowth until I found the main highway again. Headlights approached, and I waved desperately. The next truck slowed, and a woman, Tessa, leaned out, weapon ready, eyes searching mine for truth. I managed, shaking, to tell her my story in fragments. Tessa called it in, kept me covered until police arrived. They canvassed the woods and found nothing but muddy footprints and a bloody handprint on the inside door of my cab. When the official reports came back, authorities tied the incident to 3 unsolved disappearances on the same route, all involving drivers picking up young male hitchhikers. Cassius's real name matched no missing persons report. His identity ended there, with that empty wallet. The story never made headlines, destinations ticked off logs, just another incident filed away. Now, each time I pass that crossroads, I lock my doors and keep my knives stashed nearer. Every driver knows stories about the stranger who turns predatory, and the silence on stormy Oregon highways carries an edge. But I got out. Tessa, I later found, was on her first solo run. She said her grandmother dreamed she'd need to stop for someone in gray near that mile marker. This story stays with me. I keep a battered pocket knife on my dashboard, a reminder to trust instinct above politeness, above every dispatch update or plea for help. Next time a stranger's eyes linger in my mirrors too long, I know the signs. What's the most unsettling encounter you've ever had with a stranger on the road? And do you think every highway hides a true threat behind an innocent face? Share your tales. Caution and instincts might just save another driver. My name is Journey, and for 12 straight years, I maintained a flawless safety record, hauling freight across Oregon and Washington. Driving isn't just a profession. It's discipline, precision, routine checks, adhering to DOT regulations down to the last comma. Every weigh station is a checkpoint, verifying loads, ensuring compliance, maintaining order on highways that stretch beyond horizons. But in April 2023, an I-5 weigh station near Medford became the place where numbers stopped making sense, where reality itself seemed subject to falsification, and where my certainty crumbled into paranoia that still hasn't fully released its grip. The drive down from Portland had been typical. Mild weather, moderate traffic, the hum of 18 wheels on asphalt blending into white noise. My cargo manifest showed construction materials, steel beams, rebar, concrete mix, standard industrial load, properly secured, documented with precision. I'd weighed the rig at departure, Gross weight, 78,200 pounds, well within the 80,000-pound federal limit. Everything by the book, every decimal point accounted for. Approaching the Medford way station at 3:47 p.m., I followed protocol, signal slow, merge into the scale lane. The facility was newer, electronic readouts replacing older analog systems. Efficiency prized over human interaction. I rolled onto the scale platform, feeling the familiar slight compression as sensors calculated mass and distribution. The digital display flickered, then showed a number that made no sense. 118,200 pounds. 40,000 pounds over my loaded weight. 40,000 pounds over the legal limit. Impossible. I checked my mirrors, wondering if another truck had somehow rolled onto the scale behind me, but the lane was empty. The readout blinked, steady and insistent. 118,200 pounds. An inspector emerged from the station office, clipboard in hand, expression bureaucratic and tired. He approached my window with mechanical efficiency, asked for documentation, and pointed at the scale reading. "You're 40,000 over," he stated, voice flat. No question, just assertion. I protested immediately, pulling out my bill of lading, my origin weigh ticket showing 78,200 pounds. "This is wrong. I weighed in Portland 3 hours ago. There's no way I gained 40,000 pounds. The inspector studied my paperwork with disturbing calm, eyes scanning numbers without comprehension registering. "Scale doesn't lie. 40,000 over. You'll need to unload and reweigh." The taste in my mouth turned metallic. Stress, confusion, the bitter edge of fear. I climbed out of the cab, boots hitting pavement with hollow thuds that echoed wrong in the afternoon air. Other truckers at the station moved in strange synchronicity, their conversations muted, words overlapping in monotone repetition. Protocol requires compliance. Scale verification mandatory. 40,000 discrepancy noted. I demanded to speak with a supervisor to check the scale. Calibration to verify anything. The inspector simply repeated, "Scale doesn't lie. Begin unloading." His face held no emotion, eyes focused somewhere past me. And when I looked into them, I saw reflections that didn't match the surrounding landscape. Darker trees, storm clouds, where clear sky should be. The unloading process was surreal. Each steel beam removed, each bag of concrete mix offloaded and reweighed on portable scales. Individual components tallied correctly, beams at documented weights, materials matching manifests. But when they directed me back onto the main scale, the readout persisted. 118,200 pounds, exactly 40,000 over my actual loaded weight. Other drivers began arriving, pulled in for routine inspection. I watched them go through identical procedures, scale readings showing impossible overweights, inspectors calmly insisting on unloading, drivers protesting with increasing desperation. Each one exhibited the same 40,000-pound discrepancy, as if the station itself had decided on a number and reality bent to accommodate it. One driver, a woman in her 50s, hauling dairy products, broke down crying as inspectors recorded her violation. Her cargo had been weighed at origin, certified by state agriculture officials, documented through GPS tracking. None of it mattered. The scale insisted she was 40,000 pounds over, and the inspectors noted it with mechanical precision. I demanded access to scale documentation, invoking federal inspection rights. The inspector produced maintenance logs showing dozens of overweight violations in the past week, every single one recording an exact 40,000-pound discrepancy. Different trucks, different loads, different times of day, all identical in their impossible mathematics. The air around the way station felt heavy, charged with electrical tension that made my skin prickle. Temperature fluctuations created pockets of cold that defied the afternoon warmth, and shadows cast by the building stretched in geometries inconsistent with the sun's position. I could taste ozone and something chemical, bitter compounds that had no business existing in open air. When I tried photographing the scale readout and my documentation side by side, my phone malfunctioned. Images saved as corrupted files, screens flickering with static patterns, numbers rearranging themselves in captured frames. Other drivers reported similar technical failures. GPS units showing contradictory coordinates, dash cameras recording backwards timestamps, communication systems cycling through channels that didn't exist. An unmarked sedan arrived around 6 p.m., two individuals in nondescript clothing emerging with briefcases and clipboards. They conferred with station personnel in hushed tones, occasionally glancing toward the gathered drivers. One approached me, introduced himself with a name I immediately forgot, and asked detailed questions about my mental state. Stress levels, sleep patterns, medication use, history of psychological treatment. The scale is functioning correctly, he assured me, voice clinical and detached. These incidents occur periodically. Standard protocol requires observation and documentation. When I demanded explanation for the 40,000-pound impossibility, he simply noted my heightened emotional response on his clipboard. By evening, they released me. No citation issued, no formal violation recorded, just a notation in my file about scale anomaly, driver distress. They suggested I seek medical evaluation, implied that extended driving hours might affect perception and judgment. Other drivers received similar dismissals, herded out of the station with warnings about fatigue and hallucination. I drove away, shaking, unable to reconcile documented evidence with experienced reality. That night, parked at a truck stop 50 miles south, I researched the station through trucker forums and social media groups. Stories emerged, drivers reporting identical experiences, exact 40,000-pound discrepancies, inspectors behaving like automatons, reality feeling negotiable. Several drivers mentioned psychiatric admissions following their way station encounters, breakdowns triggered by mathematical impossibilities, reality checks failing, trust in sensory input collapsing. One forum post, quickly deleted, claimed the station was testing cognitive resilience, measuring psychological breaking points, documenting how humans respond when numbers stop obeying rules. In subsequent weeks, I passed that way station multiple times, always taking the bypass lane when available. On occasions when inspection was mandatory, I watched the scale with dread, and twice saw my weight register normally, readings matching documentation perfectly. But the inspector who processed me both times was the same man from April, and his eyes held that same distant focus, and when he handed back my paperwork, I noticed his movements were identical frame by frame, as if performing scripted actions rather than organic behavior. 3 months later, news emerged of a DOT investigation into calibration irregularities at the Medford station. Official statements mentioned software glitches, sensor malfunctions, temporary closures for maintenance. But the investigation report, when finally published, contained no mention of the 40,000-pound pattern, no reference to multiple simultaneous violations, no acknowledgement that reality itself had become negotiable in that facility. I still drive I-5, still haul freight through Oregon, but the way station remains, and sometimes late at night I see it in mirrors, lights burning steady, scales waiting, inspectors standing in formation, and I wonder if I passed some test by leaving, or failed one by accepting that numbers could lie, that documentation might be fiction, that the world operates on rules subject to revision by forces beyond comprehension. Other drivers know the stories. Now, we exchange warnings at truck stops, share navigation routes that avoid certain facilities, compare notes on experiences that defy explanation. Some refuse to discuss it. Trauma too fresh or sanity too fragile. Others obsess over the mathematics, trying to find patterns in impossibility, searching for logic in systems designed to resist understanding. The worst part isn't the memory of that afternoon. It's knowing I'll drive past that station again and wondering if next time the scale will read correctly or if I'll face another impossible number. Another test of whether I trust my documents or my reality. Whether I'll accept what instruments tell me or what logic insists must be true. Do you trust the official explanations when they contradict what you've witnessed? Or does doubt linger once systems reveal their capacity for wrongness? Tell us in the comments if Highway Authority has ever challenged your grip on reality itself. Thanks for riding along through these 8 terrifying Pacific Northwest trucker tales. The highways hide more than headlights can reveal, and every mile carries stories drivers whisper in the dark. If these accounts left you unsettled, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Black Fears brings you true horror stories that prove reality is stranger and more terrifying than fiction. Drop your own highway encounters in the comments, share this video with fellow drivers, and remember, some roads never really end.